So we've defined science. We've got an idea of what science means. Bio 100 is a biology course. Biology is the study of life. That's what bio means. Bio means life. Ology means the study of. Okay, that's easy. But then we have to ask ourselves, well, what is life? And it turns out that biologists are still debating how to define life. You can go on the internet and you'll find a definition in Wikipedia. I have a whole bunch of biology textbooks on my bookshelf, and I'd be willing to bet if I pulled two of them out, they would have slightly different definitions. But there are some common concepts. There's homeostasis. Homeo means same, stasis means steady, and this means that living things maintain relatively steady internal conditions. This can be temperature, pH, salt concentrations, all kinds of different things. Living things undergo evolution, the ability to evolve. Evolution is changes in a species over many generations. Living things are responsive to the environment. They will do different behaviors, or there will be different biochemical reactions in response to changes in the environment. Living things are capable of reproduction, being able to produce more of the same type of organism. And the last category is cells. We'll talk about cell theory in Module 2. Cell theory states that all living things are made of cells, and the smallest thing that we would consider living is the cell. So living things must have at least one cell. But there are things that are kind of at the edge of living and non-living. The biggest category of these are the viruses. Like COVID-19 is caused by the virus SARS-CoV-2. So there's a virus we've all heard of. E. coli is a virus. No, I'm sorry, E. coli is a bacteria. AIDS is caused by the HIV virus. You've probably heard of that one as well. The flu is caused by a virus. So, viruses, do they do homeostasis? Yeah, they maintain pretty consistent internal conditions. Do they evolve? Oh, definitely. We all know that. SARS-CoV is a recently evolved virus that is causing quite the stir in our lives right now. Are they responsive to changes in the environment? Well, only when they come in contact with a cell or are infecting a cell. Then they're capable of responsiveness. If the virus is sitting on your desk, it's not going to respond to changes in temperature or humidity or anything like that. Reproduction. Well, viruses do reproduce, but only when they are infecting a host cell. They have to be inside of a cell so they can use that cell's machinery to make more viruses. Of course, this is often true of a lot of parasites as well. Parasites that can even be, animals, complex organisms that are clearly living. Is a virus made of at least one cell? Nope. This is where we can draw the line and say clearly that although viruses are really close to being living things, they're not. But of course, this is the definition that people put forward. Biology is not going to neatly fit in little categories, no matter how much we want it to. It's more complicated than that. Viruses are more complicated than chemicals, but they don't have all of the characteristics of what we think of as living organisms. They're kind of in between. Biology just does not read the textbook. So we've kind of defined life. Now we can talk about how we organize life. So the modern organization of living things groups organisms based on how genetically related they are, how genetically similar they are. We think this represents the evolutionary history of living things, how closely related living things are. Groups that split off from a common ancestor more recently are closer together in the organization system than those that split off from a common ancestor much earlier, much longer ago. And we organize life into 3 domains. All living things are put into one of these domains based on their cell structure and the biochemistry in their cells. So bacteria, we've heard of these, E. coli that I mentioned earlier. This is a relatively simple cell. Even so, they're pretty diverse. Most likely, the earliest forms of life were bacteria. The Archaea group, you've probably never heard of this. Again, these are relatively simple cells. The way their cells look, they really look like bacteria, and they live as single cells. But if you look at their genetics and the biochemistry that goes on inside of the cell, they're more like our cells than they are like bacteria. That's unexpected. The third category is eukarya. Eukarya are things with complex cells. Eukarya tends to have larger cells. We are in this domain, and while there are single-celled eukarya, if anything is multicellular, it's definitely in this category. Archaea and bacteria can live as connected cells, but if you break them apart, each individual cell is capable of living. Multicellular eukarya, it's not necessarily the case. If you cut a dog into tiny little pieces, you're not getting a bunch of little tiny dogs. Bacteria probably make up over 3/4 of all species on Earth. And even though they're single-celled and they're small cells, they make up over 12% of the biomass. Biomass is the weight of all living things on Earth. So if we just went by weight, they would weigh 12% of all living things. We'll talk more about bacteria in the module on germ theory, but I do want to mention right now that the vast majority of bacteria do not cause disease. That's what we think about when we think about bacteria. But many bacteria are beneficial. They break down dead organisms. They live in our digestive tract helping us digest certain foods and absorb certain nutrients. They're important for helping plants grow and thrive. Most of the research we've done on bacteria has been on disease-causing bacteria. We're just starting to understand these beneficial bacteria. Archaea as a group is really poorly studied. There are no known diseases caused by archaea, so we don't have really good estimates on how many there are or what they do. Stay tuned. The eukarya group consists of both single and multicellular organisms. We group these into kingdoms. These kingdoms include animals, multicellular organisms capable of independent, controlled movement. So we are capable of moving under our own power and in the direction we want to go. Plants are multicellular and usually capable of photosynthesis. They have cell walls made of cellulose. Plants make up over 80% of the biomass on Earth. Wow, 80% of the weight of all living things is plants. This is great. We need plants for our survival, not just for oxygen. They're also the primary source of food for all animal life. Even if you eat a lot of meat, what do you think cows eat? Plants. They're kind of the base of our food chain. Fungi can be multicellular or single-celled. They have a cell wall made out of chitin. Multicellular, of course, are mushrooms. Single-celled are things like yeast. We like yeast. They make bread and beer. And the last category is kind of a catch-all category. If it's not a plant, not a fungus, and not an animal, it's a protist. Protists can be single-celled, they can be multicellular, and really they should probably be in at least half a dozen different kingdoms. There's that much diversity in the group. But again, we're kind of focused on bigger things, physically bigger things, things that we interact with routinely. And we pay less attention to the small stuff unless it causes disease. So that's kind of the quick overview of what is life and the major organization system, the major categories of life. The last lecture this week is going to be called The Tour of Life, and it's really going to focus in on not just animals, but vertebrate animals.